to Prism, podcast of the University of the Philippines College of Architecture. The Prism project is an electronic newsletter published by the gender team at the University of the Philippines College of Architecture, published 3 times every semester. It informs UP College of Architecture faculty, staff, and students of relevant developments, updates, events, and news concerning gender equality and women's empowerment in our community, profession, and extension work. The gender team also shares best practices of the work of colleagues and students. No matter who you are or the color of your skin, you are welcome in Prism. This is Sarah Musabi, and I would like to invite you to listen in on our 4th Women's Month 2023 podcast with myself, Sander, and Tina Angeles of Perkins and Will.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Prism Podcast. I am Sarah Musavi, your gender and development focal point for the College of Architecture at the University of the Philippines. I would like to welcome you to our Women's Month Podcast 2023 to celebrate everything about women. Hopefully, you will have new and interesting insights into the empowerment of women in today's world. Today, we have with us Sander Lacson from our very own UPCA gender team and Tina Angeles, senior architect at Perkins and Will, an interdisciplinary sustainability focused research-based architecture and design firm. Hello, Tina, and hi, Sander.
Hello, thank you for having me. Hi, Sander. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having us again today. Hi, Tina. Welcome to the podcast. We understand, Tina, that you're now in Pacific time zone. What time is it now for you there?
Yeah, I'm based in San Diego and it's around 7 p.m.
Right. And it's now 10 a.m. here. So thank you so much for dedicating some time in your evening. Thank you so much, Tina, for dedicating some time in your evening for us for this podcast today. Tina, I was told by Sarah that you finished your undergraduate degree in the University of the Philippines sometime in 2004. So it's probably been 15 or more years since then. Would you like to talk about how has your journey been since leaving the University of the Philippines?
Yeah, so I graduated from College of Archi like 2004, and then immediately after I finished my degree, I immigrated to the US, and then a couple months later I found a job, and I've been working in Southern California and San Diego for the last almost 18 years. Yeah. But I've been working as an architect for that whole time.
And can you tell us more, I'm not sure if you would have any point of comparison, but how was it working as an architect in Southern California?
It's interesting because I've never actually worked in a firm in the Philippines.
Right.
I think when you're in school, you kind of have these little gigs or rackets, but I've never really worked in a firm. I wish I could have experienced working there, but I had I had to immigrate right after I graduated from school. But I think it's been a good experience. Getting my education from UP. I think UP does produce well-rounded architects, and we're also very resilient, and I think we can make something out of nothing sort of attitude, UP, it's very we didn't have a lot of funding and stuff like that. It's our chairs are broken and all that. So I feel like I was ready to face the world and start my career anywhere. But yeah, I landed in Southern California and then moved to San Diego. And I worked initially, I had like a short stint like with a design build contractor, and then I ended up working in a firm in San Diego for 10 years. I did a lot of hospitality and higher education work, and kind of like started working on more like sustainable projects because those were like client requirements. And then typically, I worked as an architect or a project architect, and then also like did a lot of design when I was younger, like a lot of schematic phase. And then, later on, within those 10 years, I started working in the field as well, like doing construction administration. So I really wanted to become a well-rounded architect. And then towards the end of that, I wanted to pursue a little bit more projects that were purposeful, like and socially relevant. And so I wanted to work in another firm, and I stayed there for 7 years, and I learned a lot about sustainability and getting to work on more high performance type of buildings in various project types and uses. And then last year I changed jobs. I'm now with Perkins and Will, which is another sustainable and very inclusive company. Like diversity and sustainability is pretty important. And it's a global firm. So I feel like on one hand, I didn't know if I wanted to go super corporate, but on the other hand, I do recognize that there's like, if you work in a very big firm, your impact is much larger, right? So as a whole, and so with sustainability in mind, like the footprint of all your projects and your like sometimes they like to say your handprint, like in a more positive spin to a footprint, is more impactful.
Thank you so much, Tina, for sharing all of that. I think we got really excited hearing the keyword sustainability, inclusivity, and diversity from you and what you do currently. Could you tell us more about how does inclusivity and diversity fare out into your work as an architect in California?
Yeah, I think there's two things that come to like top of mind. One is how is and these are a lot of like, there's been a lot of reflection during the pandemic, like in 2020, George Floyd was murdered here in the US, and that kind of sparked a lot of organizations and private companies to like look inward. And when I was working in my previous firm, I was part of our equity lab, and every week we talked about like, one, how can the company become more diverse, inclusive, and equitable? And then the other thing is like, how does that translate to our work, right? Are the buildings we're creating inclusive and welcoming to people? So I think we spent a lot of time, like at least a year and a half, 2 years, just like looking inward and talking more about how the company is run and how people are being included. And like, is being inclusive, is being diverse enough? No, like, you need to be inclusive too and equitable. And then the work part, I think that came later. And I think that we're all still trying to figure it out. But like I mentioned before, when I started my career, I did recognize pretty early on that it felt like at that time I was more aware of the inequities that came when it came to gender inclusivity. At one of the offices I worked in, I realized there were no women project managers. It felt like there was a glass ceiling. And that was kind of a tough kind of like realization to overcome, and then later on, like I mentioned, like in the last few years, it's more about racial equity and diversity. And me, I'm brown and I live in a majority Caucasian country, but with very like everybody's kind of opinionated, so it's great. Like I feel like it took me a while to like find my voice, but now I feel like I can speak up if there's something that I want to, like an opinion I want to express, or I want to there's something that I want to achieve, then I can like talk about it now and I feel comfortable. But definitely as an immigrant, it was hard at first. Yeah. And it's
Thank
still
you,
a
Tina.
continuing, like, there's like internalized things that it's hard to overcome,
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Tina, for sharing your thoughts about the theme really of the gender theme at UPCA is equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we're really so happy that you've shared your thoughts regarding that. Specifically for today, actually, our podcast is dedicated to Women's Month, and which is part of inclusivity, equity, and diversity. Could we ask, what does Women's Month or Women's Day mean to you, actually?
Yeah, well, I think it's like, for me and maybe for a lot of people, it's celebrating the achievements of women in the past and kind of like, like admiring the women who have done or who have been courageous in the past and then worked towards equality. And I think it's like they've opened up a lot of opportunities for all genders, and that was the start, like some of like in our history, right? The women's equality, like campaigns, right? But it's interesting though, because on one hand you think that we're very evolved now. It's 2023, where are we? But and there's so many things built into like our laws, but then on the other hand, like last year here, there's been like a shakeup because the US government rolled back some of like the laws related to women's freedom of choice on what to do with their own bodies and stuff. And without getting too political, I feel like we're going backwards a little bit, in that sense. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Roe versus Wade, but that was something that was rolled back last year, and people on both sides do feel strongly about it. And then like for, in a professional setting too, right? Like less than 10% of Fortune 500 company CEOs are women. And so that's something to think about, right? Why is that the case? And then when it comes to architecture, in the architecture like profession, from college, right? Like there's even in UP when I was in school, there was like 51% were women and 49% were men. And, but then when you get into the profession, you see that that number for women dwindle pretty quickly. And so why, these are like the questions. Why is that? What are the barriers out there that is preventing women or minority genders and marginalized genders from succeeding in the profession? So I feel like we have a lot to celebrate from the past with Women's Month, but the fight is still continuing, So that's a good reminder to keep going.
That's so true, Tina. Thank you. And you've actually just mentioned barriers, which relates to our next question. And I know you might have already talked about it a little bit, but just to ask you, have you faced any barriers in your career as a woman? And if you have, how do you think you were able to overcome those barriers?
Yeah, and I think it's the society really, right? Where do I start? I feel like there's a lot, but I think because I'm an immigrant and I'm a woman from the very start, yeah, I feel like that's always been a barrier. And then there was at some point the realization that, hey, there's like a glass ceiling here, and what can I do about it? And I think what's helped a lot for me was to actually find allies, right? Like could be your friends in the industry. it could be other women in, like, just for me personally, other women in the firms I've worked with, and also men, like I've had men, both men and women, allies and mentors. I feel like I couldn't highlight that more. It's good to have champions that would advocate for you, because when
Yes.
you're young, it's hard to find the courage to speak up and to find while you're finding your voice. So it's good to have somebody who can help you with your career. And sometimes it's people who are more senior than you and have more experience and wisdom, but sometimes it could just be people who are allies that could you could share your own experience with each other, right? I also joined I would join organizations and volunteer work and
Right.
meet people there, and I've found lifelong friends from the industry who are also my like personal friends, and that way. And then at one point I started a group myself called Women in Green, and that was actually like I was going to a conference with a friend called Green Build, and
Yeah.
Trump was just elected that like in that month, and we were both like, hey, we need to do something for women. And we started a group here in San Diego, and it was to build camaraderie and support people, so that they could become leaders in our community, in the building industry and in the green building industry. So I think those have kind of helped me overcome the barriers that I was talking about earlier.
Right.
And it's also like given me confidence, right? Like I was able to start an initiative and become successful with it. And I have something to look back to and inspire myself to like overcome other barriers.
Thank
And
you
now
so
we've
much.
changed it. It's called Women Plus in Green, because we recognize it's not just women, there are other marginalized genders.
Thank you so much for that for your work, Tina. That's really very admirable. Tina, just wanted to ask further on, how do you think does being a woman come into play with regards to being a designer for the built environment?
I think there's a few things I've noticed. Like I feel like men are a little bit like maybe just cis men, I don't know, but they're like very very confident and unapologetic in a way as designers. And there's a lot in firms I've worked with, that men are usually lead designers in projects, and women tend to go the project management route or more administrative things. And it's really unfair, but you have to like fight your way to like get to design things. But women tend to be like, I think, I don't want to generalize, but there's some like commonalities, like we're very nurturing, and then we're very careful. We don't want to offend people. We're also very apologetic. And I think, I don't know if you've heard like anecdotes about men, when men try to ask for promotions or raises, they ask based on what they think their potential is. But women want to prove themselves first before they ask for a promotion or a raise.
Right.
So there's those two very different attitudes. So I guess coming back to like when it comes to design, I feel like it also depends on each person's personality, but I think in general, I feel like women tend to like not be as bold, I think, when it comes to like, hey, I have an idea, but their ideas can be bold, but just like the way to come about offering up their own ideas, where I feel like we're not as bold sometimes. It depends on like the condition or the environment that we're in. Then we feel more empowered to do certain things.
Okay. Well, Tina, thank you so much for talking more about that. Just wanted to ask you, do you think there's big relationship between also designing as a woman and the spaces that you produce. Do you have, let's say, how do you integrate inclusivity in your designs, for example? Could you talk more about that as well?
I think that's where our superpower comes from, like, because we think of different things and we can multitask and kind of combine certain things instead of compartmentalizing. And so I feel like spaces tend to become multifunctional and nurturing and all these and beautiful, obviously. And I don't want to sound like a stereotype, or I don't want to stereotype women, but I feel like just from my experience, that's what I've noticed. And it's very interesting. Yeah. And it's not like, it doesn't apply to all people. I think it depends on the person too, but there's some commonalities, I guess.
Tina, I think we're reaching the end of our episode today. Could we just ask you for some words of inspiration to everyone who is listening to us for Women's Month?
Yeah, I think camaraderie and finding advocates is very important with any part of your life, and whether it be personal or profession. And I think it's also like good to try to find your voice. It took me a while personally, but when you find your voice, it feels good to be able to speak up for yourself and champion yourself.
And Tina, I hope you don't mind. We have one more surprise for you before we actually finally end the last episode.
A gotcha question.
Yes, our surprise is a pop quiz. And here's the question for you. If given the choice, which 3 women of the world, whether they're still around or not, would you like to have dinner with?
Let me see. 3?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Well, at least
I think I would like to have dinner with Mother Teresa. She's like a champion of social justice. That would be interesting. And then I think RBG, I don't know if you know her, Ruth Ginsburg. She was Chief Justice. She's a funny lady and a smart one, so it would be good to like have dinner with her. And then I don't know, like a designer probably, or an artist would be super cool. I can't think of one right now, but someone who would inspire me like artistically. I don't know, maybe Frida Kahlo. I feel like she's super cool chick.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Tina. I think we won't keep you any longer, so you could probably have your dinner soon. I'll pass it on back to Sarah.
Wonderful choice, Tina. Personally, I would love to sit and talk to Mother Teresa as well. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you also, Xander. Thank you, everyone, and till next time.
Bye. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thank you, Tina.
As Tina mentioned, her leadership starts with clear communication that cultivates strong relationships with clients, and she is committed to a collaborative approach to foster well-informed and inspired teams and an enjoyable process. I would like to invite all of you to join our gender team. You can also contribute to Prism Project newsletter and podcast for gender equality, equity, and the empowerment of women. I am Sarah, and I would like to invite you again to listen in next time.